Welcome, bienvenidos. This is Roxana from Metamorphosis Rocks, and if I look a little peeved, it's because this is the third time I sit down to record this video, and for some reason, something goes wrong every single time. And by now, it's take 3, and I'm like, you guys know I just film these and I keep on going. I don't edit or anything like that. I'm working on editing some new stuff, but this is not edited at all. And it just aggravates me that every time I sit down to do it, something happens. So before we start with the topic of this video, I wanted to make a statement about something that happened this morning, and I'm not going to get into details except for to tell you guys one thing. This is my channel, my rules. I only have 2 simple rules on this channel, and it is don't use offensive language and don't insult anybody. Not me, not other people commenting, not anybody we talk about, not anybody. You don't come to my channel to criticize, to negatively affect another person. If you do that, I'm going to erase your comment. I'm going to delete your comment. So I hope you're happy by stating a horrible comment, because your comment's going to be gone. And if you have something to say to somebody, my suggestion is you send them a direct message. If you have a criticism, just send them a direct message telling them, why don't you try this or try that? And don't leave any negative comments about anybody anywhere. That's my advice to anybody, to everybody. So at 1 minute and 33 seconds, we're going to start with the topic of this video. And I'm going to give you a little story time, and it's not anybody else's story, it's my own. And I'm going to show you some receipts, but I'm not going to edit them in. I'm going to show you the actual pictures because I don't have a scanner right now, and I'm not going to edit this video like I said before, so I'm just going to show it to you, and hopefully you guys see it on the video. So when I was 15, I got a crush on this guy that came new to the school. I had been in that school since 4th grade. I went to 9th grade, and this guy came in and absolutely blew me out of the water. Now, actually about 25 years after I graduated high school, we had a conversation over the phone, and he remembers things very differently than I do. Apparently, I got under his skin more than I thought I did. I always thought that he had no clue I was alive, and apparently I was. But, when you're a kid, you don't know these things. Anyway, I figured if I was skinny, I would be cool. Don't ask me where the relationship between skinny and cool came in. I honestly don't know. But the thing about it is, I'm going to show you a picture about the age I was so that you understand how fat I was. And yes, that is me. I don't know if you see the little arms, but they are extremely skinny arms. Anyhow, the reality was that I was 120 pounds. I'm 5 foot 3.5 inches, and I'm very proud of the half inch, which is why I'm mentioning it. And I like me except for the fact that I had a big behind. I thought I had a humongous behind, and because I had a humongous behind, that meant I was fat, and so I wanted to get rid of it. To the point where I took rides with my friends in motorcycles, hoping that I would fall and scrape my behind on the asphalt, because I thought that would take care of it. I don't know. When you're a kid, you're stupid. Let's just put it that way. So anyway, I went ahead and I started trying to get skinny. So the trick was, and during breakfast and dinner, because I was at home and my mom kept an eye on us, what I would do is I would wait until she left the kitchen for whatever reason, take a napkin, scoop as much food as I could out of my plate, put it in the napkin, get up to get water, put it in the trash bin, under other stuff that was already in the trash, get my water, and then go back to eat. I would usually get maybe 5 spoonfuls in before I was done. I would ride my bicycle for 2-3 hours a day. And because the neighborhood was big, it was a controlled entrance, one of those closed neighborhoods where you have a gated communities. And in Puerto Rico, almost everything is gated. Even, I don't care if you're rich or you're poor, everything is gated. So I would go around and go around and go around, and 3 hours was nothing. And of course, at lunchtime, what I would do is I would trade my lunch for an icy, because I love Pepsi ices. And I would just, or Slurpee, however you call them, and I would do that in exchange for my food. And so nobody really paid attention to the fact that I was not eating at all. So eventually, I kept getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. But then I ended up going to college. So right before I went to college, there was a picture of me that was taken so that you can see the gigantic behind that we're talking about that I wanted to get rid of because, you know, kids. That is me from the side, and that's my behind. That's the gigantic behind I'm complaining about. Funny how now I look at my behind and I'm like, now it's big, but back then I thought it was huge. So anyway, I went ahead and I went off to college, and in the morning time, I would not make my mom, I would tell my mom, don't make us breakfast. I'll go and have breakfast at school because my dad used to give us $20. But I wanted to keep the $20. So what I would do is I wouldn't tell them anything. I wouldn't eat breakfast. I would go to the lunch bar, which was $2, and you could scoop as much food as you could put on your plate. And because I knew my sister, who was going to the same college I was, would keep an eye on me during lunchtime, she would see me with a big tray and think, okay, she's eating, and ignore me. Well, when I got to my table, I would have 1 or 2 spoonfuls, and people would start asking me from stuff on my plate. I knew what everybody liked. And before you know it, my entire plate was gone, and I hadn't touched the plate. So then, by the time I decided to get married, I got married 21 years of age. By the time I got married, I was about to get married. This picture in particular was taken about, I want to say, 3 months before I got married. This is how fat I was. And if you can't tell, those arms are stick thin. An interesting thing happened because even though at that point I got married and I started going to a psychologist to deal with the eating, what I obviously knew was a situation with my eating habits. At that point, I was eating maybe 200-300 calories a day. We still don't know how I made it because I was lucky enough not to have any bodily functions impaired. And, well, maybe now I'm paying for it, God knows. But at the time, I did not have any functionality issues, except for the fact that I was always tired and dizzy. Interestingly enough, I always thought I was fat until right before I got married. I was a victim of a violent crime, and somebody put a knife to me. And at that point, I got really scared. And as soon as I got married, I started thinking, well, if I'm fat, I'm invisible. And the reason why I started thinking that was because, think about it. If you've ever seen a movie back in the 70s and 80s, I dare you to find a crime victim that was not skinny and pretty and young and whatnot. You rarely ever saw, and even when there was an old person, she was skinny and it was easy to just take her bag and go away. You never saw somebody fat getting attacked. And that was it for me. I was like, wait a minute. If I'm fat, I'm invisible. Nobody will touch me. Nobody will attack me. Nobody will try to steal my stuff. Nobody will do anything because I'm fat and I'm invisible. That is the mentality that I had. And so as my psychologist was trying to deal with my inability to eat food, I kind of sort of got cured. And I'm not going to get into it right now, but basically I started eating like a crazy person. And that was for about a year and a half. And then I don't know, it was really weird because I started eating like a crazy person. I gained like 20 or 30 pounds. And then I said to myself, oh my God, I can't do this. And I started taking diet pills and working out like a mad person. And I went back down to like 125 or 130, something like that. And at that point, when people see you on the street, you look healthy. So I went from 120 maybe to 105, and then I went up to 160, and then I went to 130. That's more or less the progression. So then I got pregnant. I was 25. I got pregnant. And I was very careful what I ate because pretty much everything made me sick. It was one of those times when you feel like, eating disorders would be perfectly hidden by a pregnancy. Because most people get nausea and vomiting and all this other stuff. And you have to understand, I hate vomiting. So that was never going to be an issue for me. And because I wasn't vomiting, I didn't think I had an eating disorder. Oddly enough, the first thing that my psychologist told me the first time around was, you have an eating disorder. You're not eating. And I kept saying, no, you're incorrect. That's not how it works. And, you know, during the process, I learned a little bit, but unfortunately, I also learned how to hide it. Either way. Of course, if you overeat, you can only hide it so long because your body gets like a balloon. But I hid it fairly well for a long time. And I had a lot of psychological help and a lot of help from a lot of sources. And eventually, after my daughter was born, I thought I was cured. And here's the thing. Most people think that adults don't have eating disorders. And they're incorrect. Until I started getting what I now know are the effects of the illness that I'm carrying with me right now, I would work out like a maniac. I would eat healthy. And about 10 years ago, I found myself doing the same tricks that I was doing before. The only difference was that because I fed myself, nobody knew what I was eating or if I was eating at all. And I found myself surviving on a piece of bread, like French bread type bread, and butter for days on end. And I knew what I was doing, and I knew why I was doing it. And I had not had a psychologist talk to me or go to a psychologist in maybe 10, 15 years. And I had to go back to a psychologist. This time I went to a psychiatrist, actually, because I knew what I was doing. And I knew why I was doing it. And I was very shocked that that was a thing. So I started talking to my psychiatrist, and he says, that's one of the problems that we have with eating disorders. People think that only young girls and some young guys get eating disorders. But the reality is that any person can have an issue with an eating disorder at any stage in their life. It's a matter of detecting it and figuring it out before they kill themselves, basically. When I was pregnant, I went up to a high, I think the high was 170. 2 years after I had my daughter, I was 130, which was healthy. And I did it the healthy way. And somewhere along the line, I went back to the habits that I knew from. And the thing about it, the reason why I'm telling you this is because I want you to understand it has nothing to do with whether you're big or small. It doesn't have anything to do with if you have anorexia, if you have bulimia, if you overeat, if you exercise too much or too little. This is an issue of control. You need to control something because the world around you is not controllable. And unfortunately, the problem with this situation is that in real life, we don't have control over anything that happens to us. The only thing that we have control over is our reaction to the stuff that happens to us. And if you don't get that through your head at any point in the journey, you are going to end up with an eating disorder. It's just that simple. We don't, some people start this because they want to shut up the little voice in their head. And I'm not talking about schizophrenia or anything like that. I'm just talking about, how we self-sabotage and we self-criticize ourselves. We criticize ourselves a little too much. And I am very guilty of this. And to this day, I am guilty of criticizing myself on pretty much everything I do. But the thing about it is that now I know I'm doing it, so I have a way of telling myself to shut up. That wasn't the case 10, 20, 30 years ago. I would just either eat too much or not eat enough because I wanted to control everything. And I had control over nothing. The biggest shock to me this time around when my dad was dying was that I didn't go into it. I thought about it and I caught myself thinking about it and I started eating because I knew, for one thing, when you're taking care of two ailing parents, you don't have enough time to eat. So that's bad enough. If you add to that an eating disorder, you're asking for trouble. So this time around, I am very self-aware of every time I start giving myself some kind of messages. Because, again, I'm going to give you an example so you understand what I mean by you don't have control over anything. We had a hurricane last year, Hurricane Irma, which was supposed to go to Tampa, and it ended up landing in pretty much Orlando and creating a lot of havoc here. And people didn't think it was coming, and I knew 2 days ahead of time that it was coming straight at us because of what I was seeing in the pattern of the hurricane. And the thing about it is, I had absolutely no control over a hurricane. Nobody does. But I had control over how I felt about the hurricane coming and what my reactions were going to be to it. So we did not have a lot of money, but we had enough money to make sure that we had food for 3, 4, 5 days, actually 2 weeks after the hurricane. And you have to understand, I don't like canned goods, but if we're in the middle of a hurricane, I'll eat the damn things. So what happened was, in my case, in my area, it wasn't as horrible, and lucky for us, my husband's job had a voucher program, so we could get back on our feet really quickly. And I was able to use that money to buy real food that we could nourish ourselves with. And I took most of the canned goods and I was able to send them to Puerto Rico and to the islands where people were really struggling. So there was a purpose on everything after all. But you see, somebody else might have felt like, woe is me, there's a hurricane coming and I'm screwed, and gotten depressed and not done anything right just because a hurricane's coming. Look, everything in life is like a hurricane. Things happen all over the world, all around us, all the time. We have no control over any of them. But how we react to them is absolutely up to us. Now, if you have any kind of eating disorder, be it too much or not enough, or if you have any kind of issues that you think you should talk to somebody that knows what they're talking about, please, please go to a psychologist, go to a psychiatrist, go to whatever source you think might help you. If you don't know how to find a resource, send me a private message and I'll look in your state and I'll do a little research online and tell you some resources in your state. Just don't fall in to begin with, because the problem is, once you're in it, you're not going to recognize it for what it is. You are going to think that you're doing the right thing because you're controlling your destiny, and you're really not. I hope this helps somebody. I'm not an expert. I'm an expert on me, and this is what worked for me. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching and have a fabulous day.